$1 million. That number means something to you. Maybe it is the number you have been chasing for years. Maybe it is the number that feels just slightly out of reach. Maybe it is the number you have quietly stopped believing is possible for someone like you. And here is the question nobody asks out loud. Why do some people cross that threshold, and others, with equal intelligence, equal opportunity, equal desire, never do? The answer is not what you think. It is not discipline. It is not luck. It is not connections or inheritance or the right timing in the market. The answer is loops, mental loops, invisible thought patterns running silently inside your mind, every single day, quietly redirecting every decision you make about money, away from wealth, and back toward the familiar. There are 10 of them. 10 specific mental loops that act as an invisible ceiling, keeping ordinary people from their first million, regardless of how hard they work, or how desperately they want it. I'm going to walk you through every single one today, but there is one loop above all the others, that is responsible for more failed wealth journeys than all 9 of the others combined. I'm going to tease it now, and reveal it fully, at the 20-minute mark of this recording, because I need you to understand the full landscape first, before I hand you the map. Stay with me, because in the next 70 minutes, you are going to see your financial life with a clarity that most people never achieve. And clarity is where everything changes. Let us begin. Section 1. What a mental loop actually is. Before we name the 10 loops, I need you to understand exactly what a mental loop is, because this is not motivational language. This is neuroscience. A mental loop is a thought pattern that repeats, without your conscious instruction, in response to specific triggers, and produces the same predictable outcome every time it runs. Think of it like a groove worn into a dirt path. The first time you walk the path, you choose where to step, but after walking the same path 1,000 times, a groove forms, and now the groove guides your steps, without any conscious decision on your part. Your brain works the same way. Every thought you think repeatedly becomes a neural pathway, a groove in the architecture of your mind. And once that groove is deep enough, the thought runs automatically, in response to specific triggers, without you even noticing it has begun. Now here is where it gets critical. These loops are not random. They were formed by specific experiences, specific environments, specific messages you received about money, about success, about who gets to be wealthy, and who does not. Most of them were formed in childhood, before you had the cognitive development to evaluate whether they were true, before you had any say in the matter. And they have been running ever since, silently shaping every financial decision you have made, every risk you did or did not take, every opportunity you pursued or quietly walked away from. The research on this is clear and consistent. Studies in behavioral finance and cognitive neuroscience confirm that the vast majority of our financial decisions are not made by our rational conscious mind. They are made by our automatic unconscious systems, the loops. Which means, reading financial books gives you information, but information does not override loops. Attending investment seminars gives you strategies, but strategies do not override loops. Watching success stories and feeling inspired does not override loops. Only one thing overrides loops, and we are going to get to that today. But first, you need to see the loops clearly, all 10 of them. You need to recognize yourself in them, because recognition is the first crack in the wall. Let me start with a story. There is a woman I will call Audiola. She is 34 years old. She has a master's degree, a professional career, a modest but growing income, and a burning desire to build real wealth. Audiola has read every major book on personal finance. She knows about index funds. She knows about compound interest. She understands asset allocation. She could teach a class on it. And yet, every time she has money in her hands, something happens. An unexpected expense appears. A family member needs help. A business idea stalls before it launches. An investment opportunity turns out to be not the right time. Year after year, the knowledge grows, and the wealth does not. Adeola is not failing because she lacks information. Adeola is failing because her loops are running her. And here is the painful truth. Until she identifies which specific loops are active in her mind, and learns how to interrupt and rewire them, none of her knowledge matters. None of her effort will compound. None of her strategies will stick. Because knowledge without loop awareness is like pouring water into a bucket with 10 holes in the bottom. So let us find the holes. Let us name every single loop that may be silently draining your wealth potential right now. Section 2. Mental loops 1, 2, and 3. Mental loop number 1. The complexity loop. The complexity loop goes like this. Wealth building is complicated and I need to understand everything before I start. This loop feels like wisdom. It masquerades as responsibility. It sounds like due diligence. But it is procrastination with a sophisticated disguise. Here is how you know this loop is running in you. You have been meaning to start investing for more than a year, but you keep researching. You keep watching one more video, reading one more book, waiting until you feel ready. And ready never comes. Because the complexity loop constantly generates new things to understand before you can begin. The truth about wealth building is this. The fundamentals are not complicated. Spend less than you earn. Invest the difference consistently in diversified assets over a long period of time. That is the core. Everything else is optimization. And optimization means nothing if you never start. Mental loop number 2. The timing loop. The timing loop says, this is not the right time. The market is too high. The economy is uncertain. My income is not stable enough yet. I will start when things settle down. Here is the brutal reality about the timing loop. There is never a right time. Not a single moment in economic history has existed where every variable was perfectly aligned for wealth building. There has always been uncertainty. There has always been risk. There has always been a compelling reason to wait. And while you wait, the people who are building their first million are investing in imperfect conditions, with incomplete information, through uncertainty and fear and market volatility. Time in the market destroys timing the market every single time. The timing loop has kept more people out of their first million than any bear market ever could. Mental loop number 3, the deserving loop. This one is quiet. It does not announce itself. It whispers. People like me do not end up with $1 million. It might not even use those words. It might sound like, I am not the type of person who is good with money. Or, I always find a way to mess things up financially. Or, every time I get ahead something pulls me back. The deserving loop is built from identity. From every message you ever received. About your place in the financial world. About who is destined for wealth. And who is destined to watch from the outside. And because it is an identity loop, it is the most powerful of the 3 we have covered so far. Because humans do not act against their identity. We act in alignment with it. Automatically. Consistently. Even when the actions hurt us. The deserving loop is what makes lottery winners broke again. It is what makes high earners live paycheck to paycheck. It is what makes people with perfect financial knowledge still unable to build lasting wealth. Because you can know everything and still not believe you deserve the outcome. We are going to address that root cause at the 20-minute mark. Stay with me. Section 3. Mental loops 4 and 5. Building to the reveal. Mental loop number 4. The safety loop. The safety loop says, I cannot afford to risk losing what I have. Now, on the surface, this sounds responsible, prudent even. But here is the problem. All wealth creation involves risk. Every asset class that builds real wealth carries real risk. Stock markets fluctuate. Businesses can fail. Real estate can drop in value. Zero risk means zero meaningful return. And zero meaningful return means the inflation rate quietly erodes your purchasing power year after year, until the money you worked so hard to save buys less and less. Playing it completely safe is not actually safe. It is just a slower version of losing. Now, I am not advocating recklessness. Risk management is real and important, but there is a vast difference between managing risk intelligently and avoiding it entirely out of fear. The safety loop produces the latter, and it disguises fear as wisdom, which makes it one of the hardest loops to interrupt, because arguing against it feels like arguing for recklessness. The reframe is this. The question is not, is this risky? The question is this risk proportionate to the potential return? And is it a risk I can manage intelligently? That one shift in framing moves you from avoidance to strategy. Mental loop number 5, the scarcity loop. The scarcity loop is perhaps the most economically damaging of all the loops we have named so far. It goes like this. There is not enough to go around. People running the scarcity loop believe, at a deep unconscious level, that wealth is a fixed pie, that for every person who gets more, someone else gets less, that rich people got rich at someone else's expense. And here is why this is so financially destructive. If wealth is a fixed pie, then pursuing wealth is a selfish act, and most people do not want to see themselves as selfish. So they self-limit. They earn enough to feel okay, but not enough to feel guilty. They give money away the moment it accumulates, because holding it feels greedy. They shy away from price negotiations and salary conversations, because asking for more feels like taking from someone else. The scarcity loop turns ambition into shame, and shame is one of the most effective brakes on wealth creation that exists. The truth is that real wealth is not extracted. It is created. Value created generates wealth for the creator without diminishing anyone else. The entrepreneur who builds a useful product does not steal wealth from the market. They add to it. The investor who allocates capital efficiently does not shrink the economy. They expand it. Wealth is not a zero-sum game, but your scarcity loop may have been running that calculation your entire financial life. Now, we have named 5 loops, and I told you at the start of this recording that one loop above all others is responsible for more failed million-dollar journeys than all 9 of the others combined. We are at the 20-minute mark. It is time. 2000 hours, the big reveal. The loop that kills more wealth journeys than any other is not the complexity loop. It is not the timing loop. It is not the scarcity loop. It is this. The identity consistency loop. Here is what it does. Your brain is constantly monitoring one thing above everything else. Above profit and loss. Above opportunity and risk. Above strategy and execution. Your brain is monitoring whether your behavior is consistent with who you believe yourself to be. And if your identity does not include being a millionaire, your brain will systematically, unconsciously, and relentlessly undermine every action that would make you one. This is not a mindset problem. This is not a motivation problem. This is identity architecture. Think about what happens when someone who identifies as financially average starts to build real wealth. The closer they get to the first million, the more uncomfortable their nervous system becomes. The more foreign the territory feels. The more the internal voice says, "This is not who you are." And then, the sabotage begins. A reckless investment decision. A business pivot that unravels progress. A sudden need to lend money to everyone around them. An inexplicable loss of focus, right before the breakthrough. This is not failure. This is the identity consistency loop, doing exactly what it was designed to do, pulling you back to who you believe yourself to be. The terrifying implication of this loop is that no external financial strategy can permanently overcome it. You can learn every wealth-building tactic in existence, but if your identity says you are not a millionaire, your behavior will confirm that identity every single time. The only permanent solution is identity change, not behavior change. Identity change. Becoming the kind of person for whom $1 million is the natural and inevitable result of who they are. And that is exactly what the second half of this recording is going to show you how to do. Section 4, Mental Loops 6 and 7. Before we get to the identity solution, we need to name the remaining 5 loops, because the identity consistency loop does not operate alone. It is reinforced by every other loop on this list, and dismantling the system requires understanding the full system. Mental loop number 6, the visibility loop. The visibility loop goes like this. If I have money, people will ask me for it. This loop is particularly prevalent in communities where collective survival has historically mattered, where the expectation of sharing resources has been both a cultural norm and a survival strategy. And there is beauty in that. Genuine community and generosity are powerful forces. But the visibility loop takes that cultural value and weaponizes it against individual wealth creation. It creates a specific fear, the fear that visible wealth will bring unwanted obligation, resentment from family members, requests for loans that will not be repaid, social pressure to fund others at the expense of your own financial progress. And so, people running this loop stay invisible. They downplay their earnings. They avoid conversations about investments. They spend money on visible things, rather than building invisible assets, because visible assets attract visible attention. The result is a person who earns significantly, but builds nothing, who looks exactly as financially average as everyone around them expects them to be. Breaking this loop requires 2 things. First, the recognition that sustainable generosity requires a surplus. You cannot give from an empty account. Building wealth is not selfishness. It is building the capacity to give, on your terms, for the rest of your life. Second, it requires learning to hold financial privacy as a personal right. Not every person in your life is entitled to know the full picture of your financial situation. Boundaries around money are not betrayal of community. They are the foundation of sustainable wealth building within any community. Mental loop number 7, the imposter loop. The imposter loop is one of the most quietly devastating forces in wealth psychology. It sounds like this. I do not actually know enough to do this. If people knew how little I really understood, they would not trust my financial decisions. I have just been lucky so far. The imposter loop keeps people from stepping into financial leadership, from starting businesses, from negotiating higher compensation, from positioning themselves as authorities in their fields. Because all of those wealth-building actions require visible confidence, and the imposter loop quietly erodes confidence by constantly generating evidence of inadequacy. Here is what the research actually shows. Studies on imposter syndrome consistently find that the people most likely to feel like imposters are often the most competent people in the room, because competence develops awareness of complexity, while incompetence remains blissfully ignorant of what it does not know. If you feel like an imposter, it is almost certainly evidence of genuine capability, poorly interpreted. The reframe for this loop is not, I am amazing and I know everything. That is not believable and your brain knows it. The reframe is, I know enough to take the next step, and taking the next step will teach me what I need for the step after that. Wealth is not built by people who know everything. It is built by people who are willing to act on what they currently know, while remaining curious enough to keep learning. That is not imposter territory. That is precisely how every person who ever built $1 million did it. Section 5, Mental Loops 8 and 9. Mental loop number 8, the comparison loop. The comparison loop is the one that social media made infinitely worse. It runs like this. You see someone else's financial success, and instead of using it as evidence that wealth is possible, your brain uses it as evidence that you are behind, that you are failing, that everyone else has figured something out, that you are missing. And the emotional response to that comparison is not motivation. It is paralysis, or worse, reckless imitation. Reckless imitation is what happens when the comparison loop drives financial decisions. You see someone making money in cryptocurrency, and you jump in without understanding it. You see someone launching a dropshipping business, and you chase the trend instead of your own genuine advantage. You see someone flipping real estate, and you overextend financially to copy a model built on their specific knowledge and network, not yours. The comparison loop turns other people's success into a threat assessment rather than an inspiration, and threat assessments produce reactive decisions. Reactive decisions produce costly mistakes. Costly mistakes confirm the loop. See, this is why I cannot build wealth. The antidote to the comparison loop is what psychologists call process orientation. Instead of measuring your financial progress against other people's outcomes, you measure it against your own previous position. Am I further along than I was 6 months ago? Am I making better financial decisions than I was making 2 years ago? Is my financial knowledge deeper than it was last year? These are the only comparisons that produce useful information, and useful information builds useful momentum. Other people's wealth timelines are irrelevant to yours. They started in different places, with different resources, different knowledge, different opportunities, different family support. Your only race is with the version of you from yesterday, and yesterday's you did not know what you know right now. You are already ahead. Mental loop number 9, the sacrifice loop. The sacrifice loop is one of the most culturally reinforced loops on this list, and it is quietly destroying wealth potential everywhere it runs. It goes like this. Building wealth requires years of painful sacrifice and deprivation. This belief comes from a very specific cultural story about money. The story that says, real wealth only comes to those who suffer for it, who live on nothing, who deny themselves everything for decades, who grind relentlessly, without joy, without pleasure, without present moment living. And because that story sounds so demanding, so joyless, so incompatible with actually enjoying your life, most people unconsciously decide it is not worth it. And so they never start, or they start and burn out, or they build wealth but resent every step of the process. Here is the truth about sustainable wealth building. Sacrifice is not the strategy. Optimization is the strategy. There is a massive difference between cutting everything you love from your life in service of wealth, and thoughtfully deciding which expenses generate genuine joy, and which ones are just habits dressed up as preferences. The person who eliminates 3 subscriptions they never use, and redirects that money into investments, has not sacrificed anything real. They have simply redirected waste. The person who negotiates a higher salary has not sacrificed their weekends. They have claimed value they were already creating. The person who builds a business on evenings and weekends, over a focused 18-month period, has not destroyed their social life. They have made a temporary prioritization, with a defined time horizon. These are not sacrifices. These are trades, conscious, deliberate, chosen trades, with a clear understanding of what is being exchanged for what. When you reframe wealth building from sacrifice to strategic trading, the emotional weight of it changes completely. Sacrifice feels like loss. Trading feels like agency. And agency is the psychological foundation of every million-dollar journey ever taken. Section 6, Mental Loop 10, the full picture. Mental loop number 10. The finish line loop. This is the loop that catches people just before they cross the threshold, and it is the most heartbreaking of all 10. The finish line loop goes like this. When I reach $1 million, everything will finally be okay. Now that might sound harmless, even motivating, but it is one of the most dangerous thought patterns in wealth psychology. Here is why. When your brain attaches all of its happiness, all of its security, all of its sense of okayness, to a single external financial milestone, something deeply counterproductive happens. The closer you get to that milestone, the more anxious your nervous system becomes. Not less anxious, more. Because your brain starts running a new calculation. What happens if I get there, and I still do not feel okay? What happens if I reach $1 million, and I am still the same person I am now, just with a bigger bank balance? And that fear is often so threatening that the subconscious self-sabotage begins long before the number is reached. This is why you see high earners who make tremendous income for years and somehow never accumulate. This is why you see entrepreneurs who build businesses to the edge of real profitability and then burn them down. This is why you see investors who get every decision right until the portfolio reaches a certain level and then make a catastrophic error. The finish line loop, running silently, protecting the person from the terrifying possibility that the milestone will not save them. And the tragic irony is, it is right. $1 million will not fix an unfixed inner life. Money amplifies what is already there. If you are anxious with $50,000 in the bank, you will be anxious with $1 million, just about different things. So what is the solution? The solution is not to stop wanting the million. The solution is to separate your sense of okayness from the achievement of any external number. This is what psychologists call unconditional self-worth. The belief that you are fundamentally okay, right now, in this moment, regardless of what your bank account says. Not because your finances do not matter, they matter enormously, but because tying your entire emotional well-being to a financial outcome places your nervous system in a state of chronic threat that makes clear strategic thinking nearly impossible. The people who build sustainable million-dollar wealth are almost universally people who had learned to feel okay before they got there, who built wealth from a place of curiosity and creativity, not from a place of desperate need for external validation. This means the inner work is not separate from the wealth work. It is the wealth work, done first, done consistently, done alongside every external financial strategy. Now we have named all 10 loops. Let us talk about breaking them. Section 7, Breaking the Loops, the Rewiring System. Knowing the loops is powerful, but knowledge alone does not break loops. Only consistent intentional interruption breaks loops. An interruption requires a system, not willpower, not inspiration, a system. Here is the rewiring system I recommend. It has 4 components, and they work together, the same way the loops work together, as a mutually reinforcing system, but pointed in the opposite direction. Component 1, the loop audit. For the next 30 days, every time you notice yourself making a decision that moves you away from wealth, pause and ask one question: which loop is running right now? Is this the complexity loop, telling me I need to learn more before I start? Is this the timing loop, telling me this is not the right moment? Is this the safety loop, disguising fear as prudence? Is this the identity consistency loop, quietly insisting that this level of success is not for me? You do not have to fix the loop in that moment. You just have to name it. Because naming a loop activates your prefrontal cortex, the conscious thinking brain, and that activation creates a tiny but crucial gap between the loop and the action it would normally produce. In that gap, you get a choice, and choice is where wealth is built. Component 2, the identity script. Every morning, before you check your phone, before the day starts pulling you in every direction, spend 3 minutes with this practice. Write a single sentence, in the present tense, as if it is already true, about the financially successful person you are becoming. It might sound like this: I am someone who builds wealth steadily and intelligently. Or, I am a person for whom financial growth is natural and expected. Or, I make decisions today that my future wealthy self will thank me for. Write it, say it out loud. Then write 3 pieces of evidence from the previous 24 hours that support that identity. They can be tiny. I transferred money to my investment account. I had a conversation about money without feeling shame. I resisted an impulse purchase and sat with the discomfort. Your brain builds identity on evidence, not on affirmations alone. The combination of the statement and the evidence is what rewires the loop. Because you are not just telling your brain something new, you are showing it something new. And shown evidence overrides told beliefs every time. Component 3. The wealth environment. Loops are maintained by environment. The same triggers that activate them, day after day, keep them running and reinforced. Which means changing your environment changes the frequency of your loop triggers. This has 3 dimensions. The physical environment. What does your daily physical space say about wealth? Do you have any visible reminders of your financial goals? A number on a sticky note, a goal on your phone wallpaper, a simple visual representation of where you are headed. These are not magical, but they are directional. They keep your reticular activating system pointed at wealth-relevant information, rather than filtering it out. The informational environment. What are you feeding your mind about money on a daily basis? If the dominant financial narrative in your world is scarcity and struggle and the rich get richer, your loops will run continuously, reinforced by every piece of content you consume. This does not mean pretending inequality does not exist. It means deliberately supplementing your informational diet with evidence that wealth is buildable by people from all kinds of starting points: podcasts, books, documentaries, conversations. The social environment. We have talked about the social dimension of wealth suppression before, and it bears repeating here. You do not need to abandon your community, but you do need to add to it. Begin deliberately building relationships with people who are operating at the financial level you aspire to reach, not to impress them, not to network aggressively, just to expose your nervous system to a new version of normal. When wealthy behavior becomes familiar, it stops triggering the identity consistency loop. It stops feeling dangerous and foreign. It starts feeling possible, even natural, even inevitable. Component 4. The weekly wealth review. Once a week, 30 minutes, you and your finances. Not to punish yourself, not to obsess, but to stay conscious. Because unconsciousness is where loops live, and consciousness is the only environment in which they cannot survive indefinitely. In your weekly wealth review, you look at your progress toward your investment targets. You identify which loops showed up that week, and which choices you made in the gaps they created. You note one thing you did this week that your future wealthy self would be proud of, and you set one clear financial intention for the week ahead. That is it. 30 minutes, once a week, relentlessly. This practice alone, done consistently over 12 months, changes the trajectory of a financial life. Not because of the information it generates, because of the consciousness it builds. And consciousness is the one thing no loop can survive forever. Section 8. The $1 Million Identity Plan, your 90-day activation. Everything we have built today, all 10 loops named and understood, all 4 rewiring components mapped out, now needs a practical activation plan, because the gap between knowing and doing is where most people live forever. Not you. Not after today. Here is your 90-day $1 Million Identity Activation Plan, broken into 3 distinct 30-day phases. Phase 1. Days 1 through 30. Excavation and awareness. Your sole mission in Phase 1 is to surface the loops that are most active in your specific financial life. Not all 10 will be equally powerful for you. 2 or 3 will likely dominate. And identifying your dominant loops is the highest value work you can do in the first 30 days. Here is how. Each day for 7 days. Spend 15 minutes writing freely in response to one of these prompts. Day 1. What would change in my life if I had $1 million? And what am I afraid would change? Day 2. When I imagine myself as genuinely wealthy, what feels uncomfortable about that picture? Day 3. What do I believe about people who make a lot of money? Day 4. When have I self-sabotaged financially, and what was I telling myself at the time? Day 5. Who in my life benefits from me staying financially average? Day 6. What would I need to believe about myself to justify pursuing my first million? Day 7. What is my earliest memory of money and what did it teach me about wealth? Do not censor your answers. Do not try to sound evolved or positive. Write what is actually true for you, because the loops live in the unfiltered truth, and the unfiltered truth is where the healing begins. In week 2 of phase 1, begin your daily identity script practice. Write the sentence, speak it aloud, find the 3 pieces of evidence, every single morning, without exception. In weeks 3 and 4, begin your loop audit. Every financial decision gets named. Which loop is running? You do not have to change the decision yet. Just name what is driving it. Awareness is enough for now. By day 30, you will know your dominant loops with clarity. You will have started building the identity script habit, and you will have begun to create conscious gaps between your loops and your behavior. Phase 2. Days 30 through 60. Infrastructure and environment. Phase 2 is about building the systems and environment that make the new identity sustainable. Begin by auditing your financial environment. Do you have clear written wealth goals that you see daily? Have you automated any savings or investments so they happen without requiring a decision? Have you removed any environmental triggers that consistently activate your spending loops? In this phase, take one concrete action toward expanding your wealth circle. Not a big dramatic gesture. One conversation. One event attended. One community joined. One person reached out to, whose financial thinking you admire. Also in phase 2, begin your weekly wealth review. Every Sunday, same time, same 30 minutes. Make it a ritual, because rituals are identity made visible. And every ritual you keep casts a vote for the person you are becoming. By day 60, your environment will be redesigned. Your automated financial systems will be operational. Your wealth circle will have at least one new node, and your weekly review ritual will be established. Phase 2 is infrastructure, and infrastructure is what turns intention into outcome. Phase 3, days 60 through 90, activation and momentum. Phase 3 is where the identity becomes the action. In this phase, you make one significant wealth-building move, one that the person you were at day 1 would have found too intimidating, too risky, too outside the identity. It does not have to be enormous. Opening an investment account if you do not have one, making your first investment, having a salary negotiation conversation, launching a side income experiment, taking a course that builds a wealth-relevant skill. What matters is not the size of the action. What matters is that it stretches the identity, that it requires you to behave like the person you are becoming, before you feel entirely like that person yet. Because that gap between who you currently feel like and who you are choosing to act like is where identity change happens. Every day you act like a wealth builder, before it feels fully natural. You are wiring new neural pathways, building new grooves in the path, overriding the old loops with new ones. By day 90, you will not be a different person, but you will have evidence, 90 days of evidence, that a different kind of financial life is not just theoretically possible, it is actually underway. And evidence is what your brain builds identity from. Now let me close with something honest. The $1 million milestone is real. It is achievable for people with far fewer advantages than you may already have. But the $1 million is not the real prize. The real prize is becoming the kind of person for whom building $1 million is a natural expression of who they are. Because that person does not stop at 1 million. That person does not stop at all. That person has rewritten the loops, redesigned the identity, rebuilt the internal architecture that the old loops were protecting. And from that foundation, the compounding begins, not just of money, but of thinking, of decision quality, of opportunity recognition, of resilience, of possibility. The trap was never really about money. The trap was about who you were told you were allowed to be. And today, you got to see the trap clearly. Every lock, every mechanism, every loop that held it in place. Which means today, the trap lost its most powerful weapon, your ignorance of it. You are not trapped anymore. You are informed. You are equipped. You are the beginning of a story that ends very differently than the one those loops were writing for you. Go write it. This has been the Wealth Trap. 10 mental loops keeping you from your first million. Now move. Your million is waiting. And now, you know the way.